Breaking news from Channel 9 tonight, Greg. A Chinese jet fighter dropped flares in front of one of our Australian Navy helicopters. This is in the Yellow Sea off South Korea. This Chinese jet dropped these flares right in front and right above. It could have been dangerous. Praise is going to the pilot for avoiding them. The Defence Minister Richard Marles has said this is unprofessional, unacceptable, he says the very least. This has happened on Saturday around 7:30 our time. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's profoundly disturbing, Andrew. It's in character with the way the Chinese have been behaving. But as I understand it, our naval presence there is in pursuit of a United Nations resolution authorised by the United Nations in what is undisputably international waters. I mean, the Chinese don't have any claim to these waters and don't make any claim to these waters. We were enforcing sanctions on North Korea, United Nations mandated sanctions. The Chinese claim to be part of that United Nations system. And they dropped flares from a fast jet in front of our slow-moving helicopter. Now, the pilot did well to get out of the way, but this is a shocking incident, at the best, extremely reckless. And it points up two undeniable realities for me. The first is the Albanese government just won't take defence seriously. We have no independent defence capability, and no matter how many signals the Chinese give us, we are determined under the Albanese government not to acquire any. And secondly, what does this make of all the happy talk from the Albanese government about normalising relations with Beijing? Now, I did criticise Morrison and Dutton for sometimes overdoing the rhetoric, constantly talking about going to war with China, whereas we don't have a pop gun to go to war with, you know. But the Albanese government has swung far too far the other way. And the only time it says boo to China is when Chinese military threaten the life and physical safety of our service people at sea. And mind you, we can hardly ever put to sea because we don't have any navy. But I don't think you could get a much more serious incident than this, short of actual combat.
Let's remember the Chinese jets have also dropped that aluminium shaft in front of one of our fighters. Under this government, they used sonar to hurt some of our Navy divers that were trying to clear a propeller when they were in the water. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the government's also made a mistake when you see that these are China's intentions when they're supposedly grateful to this Albanese government for lowering the temperature, and they still do this. You know, we're fools for this government to make itself even more economically dependent on China than it has been by pursuing more and more trade deals with China instead of trying to diversify to alternative markets.
I couldn't agree with you more about that, Andrew. I've been writing about this for years and years and years. We ought to have a trade strategy of diversification. Now, one of the great big opportunities we had for diversification was the Indian Adani mine. We ought to be leaping over ourselves to trade with India, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, like-minded big economies in our part of the world. And instead we subjected Adani to a kind of a water torture for 10 years, made it almost impossible to invest in Australia. And this is an indictment of the previous government too. No Australian government has seriously pursued a strategy of trade diversification. The Albanese government is going to give a few $1 billion to American submarine makers and $1 billion to an American Silicon Valley firm to invent quantum computing, but it won't do all the obvious things, such as increasing our diplomatic representation in non-Chinese parts of Asia, increasing our trade, and you know, all the other things that ought to be part of that agenda.
Oh, Greg, it is just so frustrating. I know now how Winston Churchill must have felt in 1938-39. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much indeed for your time.